Amara had just rocked her baby to sleep, the room finally quiet after hours of soft humming and gentle pacing. The night in Accra was warm, the sound of distant traffic mixing with the chirping of crickets outside her window. She placed the baby carefully in the crib, pulled the thin blanket over the tiny body, and allowed herself a small sigh of relief. For a moment, everything felt still. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it quickly, worried it might be something urgent. When she saw the sender, her heart relaxed for a split second, but the message on the screen made her freeze. "Spending the weekend with my ex, don't worry." She blinked, reading it again, convinced her tired eyes were playing tricks on her. Who sends a message like that to their wife? Surely, it had to be a joke, or maybe he had typed it to the wrong person. Amara stared at the words until the letters blurred, her fingers trembling around the phone. She wanted to laugh, to brush it off as some twisted attempt at humor. Kwame was known for his careless comments, but never something this outrageous. Still, a heaviness formed in her stomach, the kind of weight you can't ignore. A woman's instinct doesn't lie, and hers was screaming that this was no accident. The quiet of the room suddenly felt suffocating. Her baby slept peacefully, unaware that in one text, Amara's world had tilted off balance. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, the glow from her phone still haunting her eyes. That one text had pulled a string, and now memories came rushing back, one after another, like a flood she could no longer hold back. From the very beginning, Kwame had made her feel small, though she didn't always notice it at first. In the early days of their marriage, she told herself he was just stressed, or maybe he didn't know how his words cut so deeply. But looking back now, she saw the truth more clearly. He dismissed her opinions almost every time she spoke. If she suggested something about the house or the baby, he would roll his eyes and say, "You don't know anything, just leave it to me." He made her feel like her efforts at home, cleaning, cooking, caring for their child, were nothing. On the days she was exhausted from juggling everything, he would walk in, glance around, and say, "Is this all you've done?" As if raising a baby and holding the family together meant nothing at all. What stung the most were his constant comparisons. He would bring up other women, women from his office, women he had dated before, even random women they passed on the street. "Look how she dresses. Why can't you be like that?" Or, "My ex used to cook this dish better." Each time, Amara swallowed the pain and told herself to be patient, to try harder, to keep the peace. But now that single text made everything click. His arrogance, the way he always acted like marrying her was some grand favor he had done for her. It wasn't just carelessness. It was who he really was. He had built their life together on cracks she had chosen not to see, cracks she had painted over with excuses and hope. As she sat there in the dim room, she realized she had been ignoring the signs for years. The cutting remarks, the cold silences, the way he smiled more warmly at strangers than at her, all of it had been warning her. She had wanted so badly to believe in their marriage, in the picture of a happy family she had built in her mind, that she overlooked the truth staring her in the face. And now the betrayal felt even heavier. It wasn't just about him spending a weekend with his ex. It was about all the little moments that had led to this point. All the times he made her feel less than, all the times he reminded her she should be grateful for him, when in reality, he had never truly valued her at all. For the first time, Amara let herself admit it. Their marriage had been broken long before this text arrived. The message wasn't the beginning of the end. It was just the proof she could no longer deny. The night stretched on endlessly for Amara. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the words from Kwame's text circling in her head like a cruel echo. "Spending the weekend with my ex, don't worry." Every time she repeated it in her mind, her chest tightened as though someone had tied a rope around her heart and pulled it tighter and tighter. At first, the heartbreak washed over her in waves. She thought of the years she had given him, the sacrifices she had made, the quiet ways she had bent herself to fit into his world. She thought of the promises they had exchanged on their wedding day, and how quickly those words seemed to crumble in the face of his betrayal. Tears pressed against her eyes, hot and heavy, but she refused to let them fall too easily. Anger soon followed. It rose from somewhere deep inside, fierce and burning. How dare he treat her like this? How dare he send such a shameless message, as if she were too weak to react, as if she would simply accept whatever scraps of love and loyalty he chose to give her. She clenched her fists, her body trembling with rage. For a moment, she wanted to scream, to wake the baby, to throw the phone against the wall. But she stopped herself. Instead of exploding, she sat with the storm inside her. That was when she remembered something she had once promised herself, long before Kwame, long before the sleepless nights and the quiet tears. She had sworn she would never allow anyone, man or woman, to reduce her to nothing. She had seen her mother lose herself in a marriage that took more than it gave, and Amara had vowed she would never walk that same path. The memory of that promise steadied her. She inhaled slowly, exhaled, and let the fire in her chest sharpen into something else, resolve. If Kwame thought she was powerless, if he thought she would stay quiet and accept whatever humiliation he handed her, then he had forgotten who she truly was. Through the long hours of the night, her pain began to shift. It was still there, raw and aching, but it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it whispered to her, fueling her thoughts with clarity. She wasn't going to beg him to choose her. She wasn't going to spend her nights crying into her pillow while he laughed in another woman's arms. She was going to take back control, carefully, quietly, and on her own terms. By the time the first light of morning crept through the curtain, Amara's eyes were red but dry. She had not collapsed under the weight of his betrayal. She had endured the storm and found a new strength in its center. And with that strength, she began to imagine her next move. This was no longer just about heartbreak. It was about reclaiming herself. Amara woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a heavy heart, but her mind was sharper than it had been in months. She knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to confront Kwame yet. Not with only a text message. He was the kind of man who would twist her words, laugh it off, and make her feel foolish for even daring to question him. If she was going to face him, she needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. She started small. While Kwame showered and got ready for work, she quietly picked up his phone the moment he left it charging on the nightstand. She didn't snoop out of jealousy. She searched because her gut told her there was more to uncover. She went straight to his social media. At first, everything looked normal. Pictures of him at work, casual updates about sports, a few family photos. But then she noticed subtle hints. Late-night comments from one woman, heart emojis tucked under his posts, and his replies, short but suggestive enough to raise questions. Amara's heart pounded as she screenshotted every interaction, saving them carefully in a private folder on her own phone. Later that day, when Kwame left for the office, she opened the laptop they often shared. Her hands trembled as she typed in his email, half afraid of what she might find. She clicked through his inbox until she stumbled on receipts, hotel bookings under his name, late-night transfers to an account she didn't recognize, even meal reservations for two. Each discovery felt like another knife, but she forced herself to stay calm. She took screenshots, downloaded the receipts, and organized them neatly in a folder she secretly named Truth. Night after night, she continued her quiet investigation. She tracked his spending through the bank app, noticing patterns, unexplained cash withdrawals, payments at restaurants she had never been to, and sudden charges at expensive boutiques. He was funding a life outside their marriage, a life she had been blind to until now. Every piece of evidence added to the puzzle, painting a picture of a man who thought his lies would never catch up to him. Sometimes she paused, staring at the evidence spread out on her screen, feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. But instead of breaking down, she reminded herself why she was doing this. She wasn't collecting proof to torture herself. She was arming herself. One day, she would need all of this. One day, he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of it. By the time she was done, Amara had a folder full of screenshots, receipts, and records. It was her secret weapon, hidden deep where Kwame would never think to look. He walked around the house smug and careless, completely unaware that his wife now held the keys to his downfall. And Amara, silent and steady, felt the power shifting slowly into her hand. Amara knew she couldn't carry the weight of her secret folder forever. She had gathered enough proof to destroy Kwame's lies, but now she needed someone who could guide her on the next steps. One quiet afternoon, when Kwame was at work, she dressed simply, wrapped her hair in a scarf, and slipped out of the house. She held her phone close, her heart pounding as if she were doing something dangerous. But this wasn't weakness, it was strategy. She walked into a law office tucked away on a busy street in Accra, the kind of place you might overlook if you weren't searching for. The waiting area smelled faintly of old books and fresh coffee. She almost turned back, nerves rising in her chest, but then she remembered Kwame's smug face and the cruel message that had started it all. She took a deep breath and asked to see a lawyer. When she finally sat across from the lawyer, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a calm voice, she felt her hands trembling. She unlocked her phone and slid it toward him. "I need you to see this," she whispered. One by one, she showed him the messages, the hotel bookings, the bank transfers. With each screenshot, his expression grew more serious. He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands, studying her with respect. "Amara," he said carefully, "you are not only dealing with infidelity. You are dealing with a man who has financially compromised your marriage. With this evidence, you have strong grounds for divorce. And more than that, you have the right to claim the assets you've built together." The words hit her like a spark. For so long, she had felt powerless in her marriage, treated like she was lucky Kwame had chosen her. Now, for the first time, she realized the power had always been hers. She had proof. She had the law on her side. And she had someone who believed her story. The lawyer leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "If you want to confront him, do not waste it on a private fight. Men like your husband will only try to silence you, twist your pain, and make you doubt yourself. If you want this to end in your favor, you must reveal him publicly, where he cannot escape. Amara listened closely, her pulse quickening. They began sketching out a plan together, careful, deliberate, and bold. The lawyer explained how timing would be everything, how the evidence should be revealed in front of witnesses, in a setting where Kwame's mask of arrogance would crack beyond repair. They even discussed the legal documents already being prepared, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When Amara left the office that day, the sun felt hotter, the streets louder, but she walked with a quiet strength. She wasn't just a wounded wife anymore. She was a woman preparing for war. And this time, she wasn't fighting blindly. She had a plan, an ally, and the certainty that Kwame's downfall was only a matter of time. Kwame packed his bag on Friday evening with a smug smile plastered across his face. He walked around the house as if nothing was wrong, humming to himself, occasionally throwing glances at Amara, as though daring her to ask questions. But she didn't. She played her role perfectly, calm, quiet, almost indifferent. Inside, though, her chest burned. She already knew where he was going, and this time, she wasn't going to sit at home crying while he lived his double life. Before he left, he bent down to kiss their baby on the forehead, then glanced at Amara. "Don't wait up. I'll be back Sunday night," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. He didn't even bother hiding it anymore. Amara just nodded, forcing a small smile. "Take care," she said softly, hiding the storm brewing inside her. The moment the door closed, she picked up her phone and sent a message to her friend Lydia, the one person she trusted completely. Lydia was already waiting nearby. They had agreed on everything earlier in the week. Amara had activated location sharing on Kwame's phone without him noticing, and now every move he made would appear on her screen. She watched the little blue dot move across Accra, her heart racing with every turn. Lydia drove while Amara sat in the passenger seat, clutching her phone like a lifeline. They followed at a safe distance, careful not to draw attention. Kwame seemed too wrapped up in his own lies to even suspect he was being tracked. Eventually, the dot stopped at a sleek hotel in the city center. Amara's throat tightened when she saw him walk inside, his ex by his side. The sight hit her like a slap, even though she had prepared herself for it. They looked comfortable together, laughing as they wheeled a suitcase through the lobby. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was the truth, right in front of her eyes. Her hands trembled as she lifted her phone and snapped photo after photo. The hotel entrance. Kwame and his ex side by side, his hand brushing against hers. Each click of the camera was another nail in the coffin of his lies. She zoomed in, captured the timestamp, and stored the evidence in her growing folder. Lydia glanced at her, worried. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Amara nodded, her face calm though her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears. "I'm fine," she replied. And she was. She felt a strange mix of pain and power coursing through. Pain because this was the man she had once trusted with her whole heart. Power because now she had everything she needed to end his charade. They stayed long enough to confirm without doubt that Kwame was spending the weekend with his ex. When Amara finally told Lydia to drive away, she leaned back in her seat, exhaling slowly. Her eyes were dry, her voice steady. She had seen the truth with her own eyes, captured it with her own hands, and for the first time, she felt completely ready. The game Kwame thought he was winning had just begun to turn in her favor. A week later, Kwame decided to host a dinner. It was his favorite kind of stage, family, friends, and a chance to show off the image of the perfect husband and successful man. He had invited his relatives, a few close friends, even some colleagues. The house was full of chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Kwame walked around greeting people, bragging about his latest business deal, and smiling proudly like a man who had it all under control. Amara, however, had prepared herself for this night in a very different way. She dressed with care, choosing a simple but elegant gown that hugged her figure without trying too hard. Her hair was neatly styled, her makeup soft but flawless. She wanted to look calm, radiant, untouchable. By her side, quietly blending into the background, was her lawyer. He wasn't there as a guest. He was there as her shield and her witness. When Amara entered the room, all eyes turned toward her. For a moment, there was silence. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, the kind that made people look twice. Kwame, noticing her arrival, smirked as if she were just another decoration at his grand show. "Ah, my wife," he said loudly, drawing attention to her, finally decided to look presentable tonight. A few awkward laughs rippled through the crowd. Amara smiled politely, not flinching at his jab. She sat down gracefully, letting him think he was still in control. All evening, he continued his usual behavior, mocking her in small ways, brushing off her presence, talking over her as if she were invisible. He told stories that painted him as the provider, the strong one, the man who had given her a better life. To his guests, it looked like Kwame was shining in his glory. But Amara knew the truth. and soon so would everyone else. Throughout dinner, she remained quiet, her lawyer observing silently, occasionally nodding when she glanced his way. Inside, her heart pounded, but she kept her face calm. She thought of the folder of evidence tucked safely in her bag, each piece of proof ready to shatter the mask Kwame wore so proudly. As dessert was being served, Kwame raised his glass to make a toast. "To family," he declared, his voice booming, "and to the strength of a good marriage." His words dripped with arrogance, as though he truly believed no one could see through his lies. Amara's lips curled into the faintest smile. The timing was perfect. The stage had been set exactly as she needed. Everyone important to Kwame was present. His pride was at its peak. He was so sure of himself, so sure she would play her usual quiet role, that he had no idea the ground beneath him was about to crack. And as she placed her glass down slowly, her lawyer giving her a subtle nod, Amara knew the moment of truth was finally here. The show Kwame thought he was starring in was about to end, and she was the one holding the final act. The room was warm with laughter and clinking glasses when Amara finally stood up. She didn't raise her voice or slam her hand on the table. She simply placed her napkin down, straightened her back, and looked around at the guests. The chatter slowly faded as people noticed her calm, almost regal posture. Even Kwame turned toward her, his smug grin widening, as if expecting her to praise him in front of everyone. Instead, Amara lifted her phone and said clearly, "I want to share something with you all." Her voice was steady, almost too steady, and that alone made the room lean in. Then she read aloud, word for word, "Spending the weekend with my ex, don't worry." The effect was immediate. Gasps rippled through the dinner table. A fork clattered to the floor. Someone covered their mouth in shock. All eyes darted to Kwame, whose smile faltered for the first time that night. Kwame let out a loud laugh, trying to shake it off. "Oh, come on, Amara," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "You're really going to embarrass yourself like this? It was just a joke. She's being dramatic, as usual." But Amara was ready. She didn't argue, she didn't shout. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the folder she had been guarding for weeks. One by one, she laid the evidence on the table. Hotel receipts with his name on them, photos of him entering the hotel with his ex, bank transfers he couldn't explain away. Every paper, every screenshot, every timestamp was a dagger slicing through his performance. The room fell into a heavy silence. His relatives leaned closer, their faces pale with disbelief. His friends exchanged uneasy looks. Even his colleagues, who had always admired his polished image, stared at him as though seeing him for the first time. Amara's eyes stayed locked on him. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence, her composure, carried more weight than any shouting ever could. "This," she said softly, pointing to the pile of evidence, "is not a joke. This is my marriage. And this is the man you all think is a role model." Kwame's face turned red. He stammered, reaching for excuses, but nothing came out that could cover the truth. His arrogance was crumbling before everyone's eyes. The proud host of the night now looked small, cornered, stripped bare in front of the very people he wanted to impress. His mother shook her head slowly, whispering something under her breath. A cousin muttered, "Ei, Kwame," in disbelief. No one defended him. No one laughed with him. The evidence was too clear, too loud. In that moment, Amara felt the power shift entirely. The mask Kwame had worn for years was gone, shattered in a single evening. His reputation, the image he had worked so hard to build, collapsed right there at his own dinner table. And Amara, calm and unshaken, was the one who had pulled it all down. The silence in the room was heavy after Amara laid out the evidence. Kwame sat stiffly in his chair, his face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing as if he could still find some clever excuse. But before he could speak, Amara straightened her shoulders and looked directly at him. Her voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "For everyone here to know," she began, "this is not just about betrayal. It is also about justice. I have already filed for divorce." The words hit the room like thunder. Gasps erupted again. Chairs scraped against the floor as people leaned forward, and Kwame's eyes widened in shock. He had expected humiliation, perhaps an argument, but not this. He shook his head quickly, laughing nervously. "You're bluffing," he said, his voice cracking. "You wouldn't dare." Amara didn't reply. She simply glanced toward the man who had been sitting quietly in the corner all evening, her lawyer. Slowly, he stood up, straightening his suit jacket, and stepped forward. The guests turned their attention to him as he spoke in a clear, measured tone. "Mrs. Amara is not bluffing. The divorce papers have already been filed in court. We have submitted evidence of Mr. Kwame's misconduct. Under the law, Mrs. Amara is entitled to a fair division of assets, which includes this house, as well as a share of the other properties and accounts." The lawyer paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. From this moment, Mr. Kwame's claims of being the sole provider are meaningless. Legally, much of what he thought was his will now fall under her control. The room was so quiet that even the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. Kwame's proud mask shattered completely. His hands shook as he tried to speak. Wait, please, he stammered, turning to Amara. We don't need to do this in front of everyone. We can fix this, talk about this privately. You can't just. But Amara didn't flinch. She kept her gaze steady, her chin slightly lifted. For years he had mocked her, silenced her, dismissed her as though she were nothing. Tonight, it was his turn to be small, his turn to feel powerless. His family watched in shock. Some looked at Amara with newfound respect, others at Kwame with disappointment and anger. His friends avoided his eyes, embarrassed to even sit at his table. Kwame reached out a hand as if to beg, his voice breaking. Amara, please, don't do this. Think of the baby. Think of us. But the more he pleaded, the weaker he looked. The once smug husband, the man who strutted through life with arrogance, was now reduced to begging in front of his own family. And Amara, standing tall beside her lawyer, knew the power had shifted completely. For the first time in their marriage, she wasn't the one being silenced. She was the one writing the ending, and it was Kwame who had to live with it. The room was still heavy with shock when Amara pushed her chair back and stood. She didn't need to say anything more. Everything had already been laid bare. Kwame sat slumped in his seat, his face pale, his eyes darting around the table as though searching for someone to defend him. But no one spoke. Not his mother, not his cousins, not even his closest friends. The man who had once mocked Amara so openly now sat alone in his shame. Amara lifted her bag calmly and nodded to her lawyer, who joined her at her side. Lydia, her loyal friend, moved closer too, offering a reassuring smile. Amara walked toward the door with steady steps, her heels clicking against the floor, each sound a reminder that she was leaving on her own term. For years, Kwame's family had looked at her as though she were lucky just to be his wife. Tonight, their eyes followed her with a new understanding. They finally saw the truth, that she had been the strength in the marriage all along, the one holding everything together while he tore it apart. Respect replaced pity in their faces, and that, more than anything, gave her peace. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Amara felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of betrayal was still there, but it no longer owned her. She had faced it, exposed it, and walked away with her dignity intact. In her heart, she whispered the final thought that would stay with her forever. He thought a text could break me, but my silence, my planning, and my strength destroyed him instead.